No one told me about this. Albedo did not look up from her desk as Succulent stormed into her office in Nerantal's royal villa. His narrow frame was shrouded in a heavy mantle that was tossed about as he continued to fume. That bitch shot me in the leg, while I was invisible. I don't even know what she did after that. She knew where I was the entire time. All my equipment, it was like someone chained me to a cart full of rocks. He finished walking up to her desk, angry breaths filling the space between them. Rather than reprimand him for his outburst in her presence, however, she simply returned his infuriated look with a calm expression. Maybe I should have given him to the five worsts like the others. As the Sorceress Kingdom stabilized, Albedo turned her attention to updating the woefully insufficient systems of the judiciary they had inherited. It was more often than not insufficient to deal with the reality that faced even the primitive nation of Riestais. There were so many loopholes, oversights and blind spots that she occasionally thought of petitioning Momonga-sama to allow her to tear it all up and start anew. This was, of course, simply out of annoyance. While the Sorceress Kingdom had inherited the laws of Riestais by Momonga-sama's orders, the bulk of Albedo's grievances lay with administrative and civil law rather than criminal law. It was all informative to her, however, for within the laws of a nation was the character of its people. What they considered ideal, what they thought was fair, what they were willing to tolerate. How those with power could abuse it and how those without could elude its reach. In the laws codified by the Royal Court of Riestais, she could discern how the subjects of its former territory of Nerantal might be best ruled. In addition, their system of vassalage conveniently compartmentalized the hierarchy of administrative sectors. It even worked with entire nations like the Baharuth Empire, as a client state of the Sorceress Kingdom. Their problems were not her problems until she decided to make them her problems. They independently managed themselves otherwise, and this relationship flowed down to the individual level. After formulating her initiative to update the processes of the judiciary, she selected the subcomponent of the Sorceress Kingdom appropriate for her first set of goals, Vulcanheim County. She had the Eight Fingers extract the remaining member of the Six Arms from his incarceration in Riestais' capital and put him straight to work. Without a proper baptism, however, it appeared that he did not appreciate who his new master truly was. As the seconds passed in silence, his furious expression dissipated. "I did as you asked," Succulent forced out the words. "What's the next job?" Albedo didn't answer him. Lines of worry started to crease his gaunt visage. "That's right, human, you exist at my leisure." Beads of nervous sweat formed over Succulent's brow. He swallowed and his gaze started to waver, as if looking for a way to escape. His eyes returned to the desk as Albedo produced a folder and placed it before him. He tentatively picked it up and read through the content. This is impossible," he said. "These countermeasures are absurd. No one has the resources or people to." His voice trailed off into a mutter as he read over the document again. Albedo held back a snort of derision. As a member of the Six Arms, Succulent stood near the pinnacle of power when it came to the operations of the Eight Fingers. Even so, his reaction proved that he had only ever been a big fish in a small pond, inordinately proud with his pittance of strength. "It isn't impossible," Albedo told him. "In fact, it is easily accommodated." "But, equipment with true seeing?" Succulent's face twisted incredulously. "For both local authorities and special officers assisting with judicial oversight? I didn't even know true seeing items existed. There isn't anyone in the region that can cast the spell." As an illusionist, the idea probably didn't sit very well with him. It was a single spell that could nearly render an entire school of magic impotent if one did not possess the appropriate countermeasures. All threats to His Majesty's order are to be crushed beyond the shadow of a doubt, Albedo told him. Having every member of the local authorities equipped with true-seeing items is unnecessary, however. "And these officers for judicial oversight?" Succulent sneered. "Surely you can't expect. That is none of your concern." "Right," the man's lips drew into a thin line. "Then, what should I do next?" "Return to your assigned village in the northeast," Albedo told him. "You will be retrieved once the judiciary has updated its processes." Succulent gave her one last, hesitant look before lowering his head stiffly and turning to leave the office much more quietly than he had entered. Albedo was confident that he now understood what he was, a dog whose master was only interested in seeing each of his tricks once. She would enjoy watching him squirm in dread as he desperately tried to stay ahead of her. The door clicked shut. Albedo produced another folder. This one was the report submitted by Nabril Gamma. She leaned back and perused its content until her eyes fell upon a single line. "We are not here to deliver vengeance, we are here to bring this criminal to justice." Albedo's amber eyes narrowed in annoyance. Difficult was an understatement when it came to creating a body of officers to help with judicial oversight. Of the humans involved in law enforcement that remained in the Sorceress Kingdom, the vast majority were pleased with the advent of the new nation. Long had they struggled against the forces of crime and corruption and Rias ties to little long-term effect, and they found new confidence and pride in their work upholding the Sorceress Kingdom's order. Unfortunately, confidence and pride in one's work did not mean that one qualified to work as special officers of the judiciary. A high degree of austerity, talent, intelligence and loyalty were required to serve in the role. That the sole candidate so far who met all of Albedo's criteria belonged to Shiltir was vexing, to say the least. In her opening move, Albedo had moved Shiltir's pawn and the order that allowed her to act as a role investigator in Valkyrie County out of the way. While doing so, Albedo collected insights as to why Momonga-sama had chosen her in the first place. Now, Albedo needed to form her own cadre of investigators for the judiciary, individuals that answered solely to her. Once she had them, Shiltir would have no further cause to infringe on her jurisdiction, and Albedo's achievements would be her own. But first, she needed to figure out how to create these new agents. Perhaps Pandora's actor's research held the answer. "How much did you know about the incidents in Valkyrie County?" Nabril said. "The ones that I just returned from investigating." "Ah, so our dear guardian overseer acted on the order given to us by Iron Summer, did she?" Pandora's actor replied. "I was wondering why she went ahead and borrowed you without any stated reason." Pandora's actor, in the guise of Momon, was seated at the desk in his manor office. Night had fallen over Rantle, and the Dark Warrior had just retired to his guest house in the Central District. "Albedo-sama didn't tell you?" "I don't see why she would need to," Pandora's actor said. "The judiciary is her department." "But Iron Summer signed that order for you." "That he did," Pandora's actor nodded, then swept out a hand as if to indicate an imaginary document on his desk. "But note the wording on the order. No one but us would know the true reason behind its creation. To the head of the judiciary, it would only appear that one of Shiltir's vassals was somehow afforded a special directive that afforded powers that infringed on Albedo's jurisdiction. In short, an eyesore, or perhaps an obstacle. Albedo-sama wouldn't." "Are you sure about that?" "We are all comrades from Nazarick." "That's true." He crossed his arms, leaning back on his seat. "We are indeed all comrades from Nazarick. We were created to serve the Supreme Beings and delight in that service. But tell me, if an opportunity arose to serve Iron Summer, would you happily allow that opportunity to pass to someone else?" Nabril's expression grew conflicted, and a deep chuckle rose from Pandora's actor's chest. "There is nothing to be ashamed of," he told her. "It is what we are. As we delight in our service to Iron Summer, so can we become jealous of opportunities to serve. Then are you not angry that she stole what was yours?" "Did she?" The guise of Momon raised an eyebrow. "The duties that led to the creation of that order continued to this day and will continue for as long as there are new things to discover. I will not begrudge others if they, too, can be of use to Iron Summer by, well, let's just call it collaborating, yes?" Pandora's actor leaned forward, placing his elbows on the desk and folding his hands under his chin. "You understand this, do you not?" he asked. "Do you not feel pride at the achievements of your sisters, satisfaction when they succeed? At the realization of their troubles and failures, are you not troubled as well? You are part of a greater whole, sharing in their joy and sorrow." Nabril nodded silently at his words. "Then I should also remind you that there are those who do not think this way," Pandora's actor told her. "Rather than finding paths where all can profit and find satisfaction in their lives, they seek to monopolize everything that they can. Individuals who believe that in order to win, all others must lose." "Are you saying that Albedo-sama is one of these people?" "Not all of the time, no," Pandora's actor replied. "I believe that she is, by and large, a just individual. The main exception to this is when it comes to Iron Summer's affections. There can only be one first wife, and this competition has its own rules. It may extend to anything that she believes might earn our master's favor over her rivals. Baroness Zaradnik is Shiltir's vassal, thus her achievements are Shiltir's by extension. By expending the order on some minor matter, she can move on to address larger issues that are worth more. A frown crossed Nobril's face as she digested his words. You used her? Her voice was shocked. The Guardian Overseer? We exist to be used. Pandora's actor clenched his fists before his chest in a strong gesture, used for the sake of our master. Ein Sommer himself took an interest in the matter and approved of our method. Considering everything leading up to this, I would dare say he predicted this turn of events the moment that you and he encountered Torkel Volkenheim over a year ago. Besides, I'm sure that our dear Guardian Overseer has also managed to sneak in a few side goals of her own. This was her duty as the head of the judiciary anyway. I simply spiced things up a bit. Pandora's actor rose from behind his desk, motioning for Nobril to be seated on the couches nearby. Shall I call for one of the maids to bring up some tea? It's fine. He sat down across the center table from her, crossing his legs and placing an arm over the backrest of his seat. So how is the young count since we saw him last? It had been months since they had last visited Croston and its surrounding lands. Within 2 weeks of being granted his new territories, the young count rallied his new subjects under him, enforced order and had deftly laid the foundations required to build his new administration. What was left now was for him to gradually familiarize his subjects with the new workings of the Sorceress Kingdom, a process that Albedo predicted would take roughly 2 years to reach acceptable levels of integration. It felt like a long time, but the truth was that he was well ahead of the curve. The Guardian Overseer's overall projections for the Sorceress Kingdom indicated that, if one included the acclimation of demi-human populations, a state of political and economic stability would require at least 5 years to achieve. The stability brought about by Count Volkenheim's rapid progress was such that Albedo had taken his land off of the list of territories that required moments visits shortly after. An extraordinary noble by the measures of Riestais, but overshadowed by the achievements of a certain group of noble women with lands near the city. If Volkenheim had been a baron, he would have been promoted to a count. Since he was already a count, all they could do was grant him more land to manage in the future. I don't see much of a difference between these western nobles, Nabrol replied. I suppose it's not exactly your forte, Pandora's actor said. In that case, we should move on to our own matters. Was the true objective of Ein Sommer's order accomplished? I believe so, yes, Nabril nodded. That woodlouse has regained her ability to detect criminals. Even after watching her operate, I can't figure out what exactly it is. Are you sure you want to know? Nabril furrowed her brow at what she probably thought was a strange thing to ask. Consider what initially led to her gaining the ability. Pandora's actor held out a hand. Shiltir sent her out to solve a problem. She first realized this ability after Shiltir arrived to bring about its resolution. A class promotion quest, as Ein Sommer so succinctly defined it. But then she lost the ability. Which was unfortunate. The fact remains that she already qualified for the class that manifested this ability. All she needed to do to get it back was earn experience in that class again, which is what happened in Volkenheim County. It didn't. I don't think it happened in Volkenheim County, Nabril told him. At the end of the first day, she discovered that she had regained it after neglecting to check for so long. Can the people here gain levels simply by riding around and investigating crime scenes for a day? The rate at which individuals gain levels appears to vary widely, Pandora's actor said, if the Adventurer Guild data is any indication. Low levels appear to be universally quick, as long as one puts the appropriate effort into it. As one approaches their limit, however, their progress slows down dramatically. Many elements clouded their tracking of levels in this new world, as well. Some class levels had concrete benchmarks, such as being able to cast a new tier of magic, working with more advanced materials as a crafter, or increased martial arts capacity. These were, however, broad measures that did not indicate the specific class levels one had gained. As such, their identification of class levels and advancement was similarly broad. They could say that a gold-rank adventurer belonged to a certain archetype, but pinpointing what combination of classes within that archetype they possessed was next to impossible without mountains of verified data. Even then, it could still be something they had never encountered before. Based on what we've discovered so far, Pandora's actor continued, I agree with your assessment. Baroness Saradnik is difficult to keep track of, as she doesn't consistently participate in the Adventurer Guild. Sometimes she seemingly leaps forward after performing her duties elsewhere, and other times she is unchanged. The only thing we know is that she is not slowing down yet, but even with this being the case, she shouldn't have gained a level with just her opening investigation. Pandora's actor understood that the Baroness had at least one prestige class with cultural prerequisites, demonstrated the physical progression of a warrior archetype, presumably a ranger, and also displayed commander-type abilities. Shiltir and Dora were convinced that she was a noble commander ranger, though Mare had his doubts. Civilian job classes, such as administrators and the many different types of tradespeople found in this new world, did not exist in Yggdrasil for the most part. The Baroness was a mystery relative to those full-time adventurers who only gained combat-related job class levels that observers from Nazarick could roughly correlate with classes from their previous existence. Beyond that, she had an ability that was lost to her for a few months before regaining a prestige class associated with the quest Shiltir had sent her on. This was assuming that it was the same class and not another class with a similar ability that she had gained at an unspecified point in time while she had lapsed in the review of her abilities. More research was required to find the missing pieces of the puzzle presented by her existence. All that aside, Pandora's actor told Nabril, her ability presents an interesting case for the tools that are unique to the native populations of this world. Why I asked if you were sure you wanted to know is because of what she was doing when she first gained the ability. She was hunting criminals, wasn't she? Nabril replied, Aurasuma can locate magical beasts as a beast tamer. If that's the case, the ability to locate criminals should be the result of a job class that deals with criminals. Specialized tracking abilities did exist, and those that Aura possessed worked in their new world. As a beast tamer, she was easily able to locate Hamsuk in the Great Forest of Tob, but could not just as easily locate Zulki, a colossal plant-type monster, in the same region. Pandora's actor harbored doubts over whether the ability had to do with criminals, however. It should be at least known to those in law enforcement vocations if it existed. Then again, the local judiciary was not much of an institution to begin with. And what if it's something else entirely? Pandora's actor asked. She was sent on a quest to investigate Facet County and deliver Iron Summer's justice. What if her job class has nothing to do with law and everything to do with the will of our master? That's... Nabril shifted in her seat, an uncomfortable expression clearly painted on her face. If this is the case, Pandora's actor pressed her, would you be able to bear her gaze? Your ring of non-detection will not protect you from her scrutiny, nor will it protect you from yourself. What if she one day comes up to you and declares that you have run afoul of Iron Summer's will? Knowing what you know, you would not even be able to act against her, you would only be crushed by shame and self-loathing. His fellow doppelganger did not reply. That an outsider could gain such an ability would be considered both preposterous and terrifying to the denizens of Nazarick. Well, not that we know what it is for sure, he shrugged. There are other things that it might be, and probably more that we have not considered. Because Iron Summer directly influenced her matters, however, what I described may not be as impossible as it sounds. Tell me, what else did you observe? She also learned a martial art that aided in the capture of her quarry, that should be similar to learning an offensive skill? What was it called? Nabril's lip twitched. Pandora's actor leaned forward at her curious reaction. I can't say it, Nabril's cheeks grew flushed. That only serves to whet my curiosity, Pandora's actor said. If you can't say it out loud, then take off your ring of non-detection. After a moment's hesitation, Nabril slipped off her ring. One of the many things it prevented was a doppelganger's ability to use detect thoughts at will. It took a second to make out the name of the martial art, announced with a remarkably cutesy version of Nabril's voice, through the other doppelganger's bubbling mirth. Pandora's actor leaned back in his seat. Did she really say that? Nabril nodded in reply. Pandora's actor shook his head, placing the fingers of his right hand against his temple. I would die if I said anything so embarrassing. Nabril burst out laughing, falling sideways onto the couch while gripping her sides. Pandora's actor looked over at her incredulously. Do you truly find it so humorous? Nabril only continued to laugh. Pandora's actor sighed, waiting for the storm of giggles to play itself out. Her incomprehensibly bad sense of humor aside, Nabral's thoughts conveyed what appeared to be a martial art common to rangers. As common as it was, it could not normally be learned in such a short time. This meant that it was either something that she was already on the verge of grasping or the theme of her newly acquired class, a new piece of her build and thus her identity, allowed her to learn it far faster than usual as a basic component of her skill set. Across from him, Nabral finally settled down, sitting back up and fixing her appearance. "There's one more thing I believe you should know." Her face returned to its usual placid expression. "What would that be?" She only met his gaze, left hand gripping her ring of non-detection tightly. Pandora's actor reached out to skim her thoughts again. He straightened in reflex at what he found. Supernatural charisma. Strength, speed and endurance that a human of her level shouldn't possess. Immunity to electrical damage. A confession and a question, in a voice that spoke of uncertainty, fear and terrible, terrible loneliness. Have you told anyone else?" Nabral shook her head. "It appears that one good turn deserves another." If he had learned anything about her in their time together, it was that Nabral Gamma returned acts involving herself or her sisters in kind, be it in the form of retribution or favor. Ludmila Zaradnik had kept Nabral's identity close, and so Nabral was keeping the Baroness' new existence a secret in return. He wondered how long it would stay that way. Nabral would not say anything unless she was directly ordered to by a superior, but far too many eyes were now on the Baroness. Nabral re-equipped her ring and excused herself from his presence. Pandora's actor remained seated long into the night, pondering the meaning of the new development. Ludmilla took a deep breath before stepping out from behind the hedge surrounding Corlin Manor. In the fading twilight, the magical lighting at the gate cast a lonely glow over the two footmen standing guard. She relaxed when seeing that, rather than any members of the Corlin household that had long known her, two Death Knights occupied their stations. Like herself, Clara was more practical about the use of the undead. Not only were the Death Knights far stronger than any of her human footmen, but they had dark vision, would not grow tired over the long and monotonous night watch, and there was little chance of frightening away any visitors past sunset. The nearest one turned its attention to her as she walked up the lane towards them. "Baroness Zaradnik," she said, "here to see Countess Corlin." She waited quietly, checking over her dress. Though prodded forward by Nobbe's statement, her nervousness had her make her way from Warden's Vale at a slower pace than usual. No matter how much time she bought for herself by delaying her journey, however, Ludmilla failed to dispel her worries. The banner of House Corlin fluttered over the manor's front entrance as the Death Knight returned with a human member of the household. Ludmilla fixed her expression. "Good evening, Miss Aramis," she said. "I am sorry to have come unannounced so late in the evening." Taya Aramis, Clara's lady's maid, was adorned in a light nightgown, and she clutched a shawl around her shoulders. In hindsight, Ludmilla should have called ahead, but her mind was worn ragged by worry and doubt. "Good evening, Lady Zaradnik," Taya returned Ludmilla's greeting with a curtsy and a warm smile. "It has been such a long time since you last visited. We are so happy to see you again." A cold trickle of guilt suffused into her being at Taya's words. She was supposed to stay the night with Clara once a week, barring those days when their duties called them away. Even when she was at home, however, Ludmilla only made excuses to stay away. She was disgusted with how she was treating her friend, yet the tumultuous emotions that plagued her new existence outweighed her self-loathing. She followed Taya into the manor, through the open foyer and up the stairs to the second floor. Warm light glowed over the polished wooden floor. Aromas of hospitality lingered in the air, familiar scents that brought back memories of their childhood together. At the end of the long hall was a pair of solid double doors where the lord of the manor would usually stay, but they stopped at another one halfway there. Taya gave it a light knock. "My lady," she said, "I have brought Lady Zaradnik to see you." From within the room came the faint rustling of paper. "Please, come in." Taya opened the way and stepped aside. Ludmilla made her way tentatively across the threshold, her nervous gaze flickering around the room. Wrapped in a robe of House Corlin's cobalt blue, Clara was seated on one of the couch chairs before a small center table. She was still trying to put away the folders and documents around her, and a large binder was wedged between herself and one of the arms of her seat. "Shall I prepare refreshments, my lady?" Taya asked. Clara glanced over at Ludmilla, who shook her head slightly in return. She dismissed her lady's maid, and the door closed behind Tyre with a soft click. Ludmilla went to the other seat at the table, which was placed next to Clara's. Ludmilla moved the tall stack of folders upon it to clear a space for herself. "Back from the land of the dead, I see." Ludmilla froze in her steps as the light words drifted over her. She looked over at Clara, who simply returned her glance with a smile. Her friend continued to put away her things as Ludmilla settled in her seat. Most of them looked to be reports from the numerous elder liches stationed around her domain. Each of Corlin County's 14 baronies had 3 elder liches. One of them coordinated the security of their territory while the other 2 worked with the village chiefs to meticulously collect data and maintain the conditions required for the smooth operation of local industries. In addition to her capital of Corlin Harbor, 2 other towns had been chartered. The first was at the border of the slain theocracy and the second was built halfway between the border and Corlin Harbor. Each had an administrative office with another elder lich. The offices were responsible for overseeing the respective thirds of the county that each town lay within. Corlin Harbor's town hall housed 3 additional elder liches who worked tirelessly to organize the collected data into the reports currently scattered around the ruler of Corlin County. For Clara, the seemingly endless stream of information took on a form that Ludmilla could only partly see. Countess Corlin's policies and directives were akin to the strokes of a grand master artisan, ever seeking the perfection of not only industry and trade, but the cultivation of an entire society that she considered ideal. Clara styled herself a gardener overseeing her little plot of land. To everyone else, she was an inexorable juggernaut beyond human understanding. "I just returned from Vulcanheim County," Ludmilla said. "Is that so?" Clara stacked up the last of her things on the table. "Is it something you are permitted to talk about?" Ludmilla recalled nothing that instructed her to stay silent on the matter. They relaxed into their seats as she related her time in Lord Vulcanheim's domain, including her thoughts on the nature of the criminal that was apprehended. "This is good news," Clara said with a thoughtful look. "I suspected that Vulcanheim County would be where this sort of thing would start." "You did?" Ludmilla frowned. "What makes you say that?" "Because Torkel is an excellent noble," Clara told her. "The conditions in his domain are perfect for this sort of exercise. The Eastern Territories are all up to the new building standards, and we have additional duties that would be disrupted if something like that happened here. Lord Vulcanheim, on the other hand, is overseeing the transition to the new systems. By necessity, he must also accommodate a much slower shift in culture. His work is crucial, but at the same time, it allows him the time to manage the effects of these small crises. Given his skills, he is the ideal noble for it." "That's quite the glowing assessment, coming from you." Clara smirked in response. "It is the truth," she said. "You have always been busy with one thing or another out there, so I suppose you have not been paying much attention to the workings of the interior. Come to think of it, you probably did not think much of him during your visit, did you?" "What was there to think about?" Ludmilla snorted. "He tries, to be sure, but it is nothing like how far we have come with our territories. We all have our advantages and disadvantages, but there is so much more that he could be doing." Clara gave her a long look. "You are doing it again." "Doing what again?" "We have discussed this several times before, have we not? Up until recently, the history of House Saradnik was, and then it got worse. As a result, you and your family have always had an eye for problems, almost to the exclusion of everything else." "It is something of a necessity," Ludmilla muttered. "There are always problems, and problems waiting after those problems." Clara crossed her legs, folding her hands on her lap. Having seen her do this on many occasions, Ludmilla steeled herself. "I am not blaming you for growing up in that sort of situation," Clara told her. "But it does affect the way you see things to this day. You organize life into sets of problems and constantly seek ways to solve them. Being unable to solve problems is a problem in itself. When you run low on problems, you go looking for more because in your experience there should always be more problems. I will bet that it was the vast majority of what you were doing in Vulcanheim County." Ludmilla released a resigned sigh. Clara was far too sharp. Ludmilla did try reining in the tendency that her friend described once in a while, but it would inevitably resurface. "The other end of things suffers as well," Clara continued. "The value that you place in achievements, both those of others and your own, are left by the wayside because you prioritize problems. If you compare the improvements that you have made for yourself or your domain to others, you only reframe it as another problem to tackle. You wonder how you can ever catch up, think about things that you might be doing wrong, or wonder what can go wrong. Then it leads to every other problem you have to deal with. I do not think it is explicitly bad. Self-assessment is not bad. Re-examining one's work is not bad. Competitive instincts and the desire to succeed are not bad, either. Not explicitly. The problem is that you only ever seem to dwell on problems. I might be used to it, but others are not. Half the reason why the House of Lords is scared to death of you is because they think that you are going to tear them to shreds over all of the problems they have been working so hard on to address. When they know so little of you, it is not a very nice thing to be subjected to. My subjects do not seem to mind. Clara let out a small laugh. They are your subjects, she said. Your subjects are exposed to the benefits of your rule on a daily basis. This influences the interpretation of your interactions with them. It is a far cry from being another noble that only sees you attending the House of Lords on rare occasions. Most of what they know of you revolves around being a frontier noble and the whole of Facet County being depopulated overnight. No matter how helpful you think you are being, they will tend to see your problem-oriented stance as an attack. Her friend's expression softened. She tilted her head as she settled into a more comfortable posture. Your domain is growing, Ludmilla. Your future plans involve leading far more people than your family has ever had before. Those people will genuinely respect you for the soundness of your rule, but if you could only work on this part that you keep neglecting, they will truly adore you. Lord Volkenheim's people adore him, Ludmilla noted. It does not appear to help him. Clara leaned over with a scowl, reaching out to playfully swat at her. Ludmilla dodged the attack. He would not be as successful as he is if he was not so skilled, Clara huffed. He is nearly the same age as we are, and he managed to do everything that he has in 3/4 of the time that we have. Anyone else in his position would have given up and begged for mercy instead. Even you? Except for me, Clara rolled her eyes. The Prime Minister likes using my work to prod the other nobles forward, but I suspect that she mostly does it to watch everyone squirm. Realistically speaking, it should take the entire Sorceress Kingdom about 5 years to stabilize. This includes the integration of the subjugated demi-human populations. Clara peered at her suspiciously, and Ludmilla grew nervous. What? I cannot help but think that you and Lady Albedo are kindred spirits, Clara said. She does the whole thing with the problems as well. I wonder who is more austere between the two of you. I have never met the Prime Minister before. She is not much for pleasantries. You can tell that she would rather be discussing work. The only reason she bothers meeting with any of us is to address one problem or the other. Anyway, that is enough about that. We have a lot of catching up to do. I would especially like to hear about your first adventure. I never imagined that it would lead to those statues in front of the city gate. As the evening wore on, the topics she had fallen behind on wore thin. Ludmilla's trepidation threatened to swallow her even as she tried to find the courage to tell Clara what she had become. Her closest companion had known her for far too long to not notice her unease. Clara's amethyst gaze drifted over Ludmilla curiously. Was there something else you wished to talk about? She asked. Ludmilla swallowed as she gripped her skirts nervously. After several long moments, she resolved herself and spoke. Clara, there is something I need to tell you. I suppose this would be the true reason as to why you have been avoiding me all this time? I was not avoiding you, Ludmilla nearly shouted before catching herself. Well, I was. But it is not your fault, it is something to do with me. She started to tremble, and she clenched her fists in an effort to force herself still. Clara's expression turned grave. To make you quake like that, Clara smirked, others would imagine the end of the world is coming, at least. Is there some sickness going around your domain? Do you need my help? I knew the temples should have sent at least. I died, Clara. There was a brief pause between them. I know I was a mess the first time you told me that, Clara told her, but I still got used to it. I stayed dead. A small furrow appeared over Clara's brow. She reached over and poked Ludmilla in the nose. Ludmilla flinched away. You seem quite lively to me, Clara said. I'm serious. Clara drew back to regard her with a concerned look. Was it Lady Shaltier? Lady Shal, no. No, Of course not. I do not know how it happened. I think it was that fight with the frost giants that I told you about just now. I died in that avalanche, and then I got up again. Clara leaned to look at her from side to side. I don't see much of a difference, she said. If anything, you look even better than before. Did Lady Shiltier have anything to say about it? She has no idea what I am. Ludmilla shook her head. I barely know anything about myself now. That is the reason why I stayed away. I do not know what I am or what I am capable of doing. I do not want to hurt anyone, Clara. Most of all you. Her throat seized, and tears welled up in her eyes. She reached up to wipe them away, but more only came. I am scared, Clara, she sobbed. What is going to happen to me? What am I going to do? Clara silently rose and padded over to her bed. Her clothes formed a silken puddle at her feet, and then she lay down and pulled the covers over herself. Ludmilla bit her lip. Why did she have to say it like that? Even after weeks of trying to come to terms with herself, she still fell apart. Everything was falling apart. Dejected, she stood and turned to leave the room. Where are you going? Clara's voice came from behind her. Outside, Ludmilla looked over her shoulder. I do not wish to disturb you any more than I have to. Clara sat up, fixing her with a stern look. Nonsense, she said. Come to bed. But. No buts, Clara's voice was firm. You owe me 4 nights for each week you have skipped out on, Ludmilla Zaradnik. Several seconds passed between them. Clara's no-nonsense expression faded, replaced by a gentle smile. Ludmilla turned. Her feet brought her forward with desperate steps and she fell into Clara's arms with a cry. A soothing hand stroked her hair as she released all of her pent-up emotions into her friend's breast. We can figure this out together, Clara held her close. No matter what happens, I will always be here for you. Something's off, boss. Doesn't look good. You're gonna have to do better than something's off. The Deep Warden looked over Phalagrams to the caravan behind him. He expelled a long sigh. It's too quiet, he said in a low voice. The entire riverbank's empty of everything. Should have been someone there, drawing water, or washing their things and whatnot. You sent someone for a closer look? Phalagram asked. If you are doing that right now, the Deep Warden answered. I came back to let you know in advance. One of the grey robes nearby raised his head to peer out over the tall grass of the plain. Their destination was far out of the effective range of their dark vision, but there should have been signs. So many demi-humans had to have some fires visible from where they were, yet only the still darkness of the night could be seen. Fearing that some threat lay ahead, Phalagram sent his scouts to investigate. Should we turn around? Agony asked from beside him. Philagrim's mouth twisted at the thought. The caravan behind them was the largest since the last goblin army formed decades ago. With the leaders of the current one mulling over whether to advance before winter set in, Clan Fjellhammer put together nearly everything it had to seize the opportunity before it wandered off. They were delivering equipment forged for tens of thousands of demi-humans, tools and other items for camp life, the supplies to feed all the men and women hired to deliver their goods, not to mention all the wages they owed. Turning around was worse than going home empty-handed. Clan Fjellhammer would be realizing a catastrophic loss if they couldn't make their sale. Let's see what the rest of the scouts find out, Phalagram said. They might have gone over the pass. I can't see how 100,000 demis just vanishes in a month. Keep moving. They trudged forward. No one dared utter a word about the crisis that had suddenly come upon them. As the sound of the first river ford could be heard in the distance, more scouts returned. They bore grim looks, but that did not mean very much. Dark dwarves were nearly always grim. What did you find? Phalagram asked. We found the villages the Demis put up, one of the scouts answered, but every one of them is empty. Did something happen to them? Hard to tell. Place got cleaned out, and there's tracks from a lot of different races everywhere. They've been gone for weeks. Whatever happened must have been a week or so after we last dropped by. Did they move on? Or were they attacked? Philagram's gaze turned to look south. 100 kilometers of wilderness separated the demi-human villages from the border of the slain theocracy. Was it possible that the humans had acted preemptively to remove the potential threat to their borders? He had never heard of them doing anything but clearing out their immediate area, certainly nothing that would bring them this deep into hostile lands. There was no point in expending resources so far from any place they had a vested interest in. How much damage was there? Barely any, the scout shook his head. They might have packed up and moved over to the other side. We sent some teams to take a look, but it'll take days for them to report back. Days? How much would that cost them? They wouldn't run out of supplies since he expected that it would take a week to send everything, but unless they figured out where their customers went, they would be burning it all away for nothing. What other choice did they have? We'll stay in those woods until the scouts report back, Falagrim said. I'll be damned if we have to camp out in the sun. The caravan crossed the river fords, and Falagrim settled them in the nearest village. His people picked out which of the crudely constructed hovels they would stay in, and their merchandise was collected along the village lanes and put under guard. Within an hour, the settlement returned to life, though the inhabitants had changed. Once their surroundings were secured, the dark dwarves split up into shifts for camp duties. Falagrim gathered his regulars around the bonfire built in the village crossing. If this place was cleaned out, he muttered, why is all the firewood still here? The orc boss, QRS, was it? He mentioned something about the forest being full of undead. Are you suggesting that the undead got them? Falagrim scoffed. A lot of those demis were strong, even elder liches wouldn't stand a chance. Hey, just putting it out there. I heard of undead collecting a lot of things, but I never heard of them collecting wood. Falagrim rolled his eyes. He looked to his left. Agni? If there are any undead in the area, the cleric replied, I couldn't sense them when we checked the surroundings. Take a troop and look further out, Falagrim told her. I think there were supposed to be ruined villages or towers or something like that around here. Of course, my prince. Agni's shouts sounded over the trees as she rounded up members for the impromptu patrol. Falagrim left the bonfire as well, making his rounds to ensure that everything was in order. Everywhere he went, he could sense the uncertainty of his caravan members as they waited for news. By morning, they did confirm the presence of undead deeper in the forest, but they weren't anything that could have troubled the goblin army. Things remained uneventful until, 3 days later, the scouts started to return from the other side of the pass. We didn't get far, one of the veteran deep wardens said, but what we saw on the way was pretty telling. I'm guessing that means we don't have customers anymore. The scout shook her head with a bleak expression. I've never seen anything like it, she said. The pass is blasted and scorched. Even the rocks are cracked. The cliffs, it's like someone took thousands of demis and mashed them up to give the mountain a new coat of paint. 500 meters above the trail. Did they piss off an ancient fire dragon? Murmurs rose from the gathered dwarves. A few looked up towards the canopy as if they expected flaming death to befall them at any point. There hasn't been a dragon sighted in the Abelian wilderness since before the time of the demon gods, a grey robe said. The forest giants killed off or drove away the last of the green dragons, then the humans from the theocracy got the last of the forest giants after they were thrashed by the demon gods. If it wasn't an ancient dragon, Falagrim said, then what was it? What else could do that to this goblin army? The crowd fell silent. Truth be told, Falagrim couldn't think of anything that made sense, either. Another scout appeared, making his way through to him. A dragon, he said. I saw a dragon on the other side of the pass. Let me guess, Falagrim said, a fire dragon. What? No, it was a frost dragon. Well, it was an ice blue one, at least. I saw it on the way back, around sunset. The thing was skimming over the trees without a care in the world. Falagrim scratched his tattooed scalp. The new information didn't make any sense at all. What would a frost dragon be doing down here? He asked. Winter doesn't even stick to these mountains. I don't know, boss, but I know what I saw. Maybe it was some sort of albino fire dragon. He scoured his memory for what he had learned of dragons in general. How big was it? Falagrim asked. I didn't come that close, the scout said, but I'm guessing less than a dozen meters long. It felt powerful, though. Maybe around elder? Maybe it was a frost dragon. An elder fire dragon would be upwards to 30 meters in length. Or maybe it was a midget albino fire dragon. A commotion rose from somewhere outside the crowd. Another scout pushed his way through. We brought back some prisoners, she said. What kind of prisoners? Armat, boss, the scout told him. They were holed up in a shallow cave on the mountainside. Saw 'em coming out to forage and we rounded 'em up. Armat? He recalled the goblin army having a few of them. Maybe they could finally figure out what was going on. Take me to them, Falagrim said. He followed the deep warden to the outskirts of the village, where a handful of the rodent-like demi-humans were chained to a tree. Falagrim's expression grew dark. Using metal chains to bind a metal-eating race was fairly close to the pinnacle of stupidity. Fortunately, the presence of several guards appeared to have deterred any attempts to escape. The huddled group of demi-humans shied away at Falagrim's approach, whiskers twitching as they sniffed in his direction. "Were you with that goblin army from a month ago?" he asked. The Armat exchanged glances with one another. The largest one nodded her head. "We were." "What happened to them?" "We came to trade, but all we could find was some blasted rocks in the pass." That was Yaldabaoth's doing." The name came out in a fearful whisper, and a keening wail rose from the rest of the Armat. Falagrim frowned. The demi-humans they had come to trade with mentioned a demon emperor who went by that name. Yaldabaoth and his minions had descended upon the Abelian hills, indiscriminately attacking the hundreds of tribes that lived there and capturing them in droves. According to QRS and the other demi-human leaders, Demon Emperor Yaldabaoth was the entire reason that they were migrating east. "So this Yaldabaoth," Falagrim said, "he attacked your army? Any other survivors?" "I don't know," the Armat shuddered. "He came so suddenly. There was an army of powerful fiends with him. The orc villages were overwhelmed in minutes, and he drove them over the mountain pass." "What about the others?" He pressed for more information. "The gnolls? The goblin army?" "We were in the villages, and we fled into the forest when Yaldabaoth came. The goblins had long crossed to the other side, and the gnolls went days before the attack to help with scouting. But it was Yaldabaoth. There is no way that they could have survived his wrath." The Armat cradled her head in her claws as if trying to hold it together against some memory within. The leaders of the demi-human army spoke of Yaldabaoth as a fiend who would bring about the end of the world. Falagrim, however, was skeptical. The demi-humans had been able to escape him, after all. Until now, at any rate. He weighed the possibility of the demi-human forces further away surviving to flee. "What should we do with them, boss?" Falagrim looked over at the guard who had asked. "What kind of question is that?" "Lock them up. The foreman at home will pay handsomely for Armat slaves. Make sure you put them in cages that they can't eat their way out of." Though they were well within earshot, the Armat did not react to his words. They offered no resistance as they were taken away, their feet listlessly shuffling forward to a life of toil in the labyrinthine mines below the ancient mountains. Falagrim didn't give their ragged forms a second glance, however. He had bigger problems now. The existence of his clan depended on selling goods with no buyers. Before finding any, the caravan members might turn on him for leading them to ruin. No, that was unlikely. Agony and the other regulars would stop them. Their fortunes rose and fell with him. He returned to a frenzy of activity in the village center. In the buildings all around, it looked like everyone was packing away their things. "What the hell is going on here?" he shouted as he walked up to Agni. "The last of the scouts returned," she replied. "They found undead on the other side." "So now we have undead." Falagrim's knuckles went to his hips. "I don't see why we're in such a hurry if it's just some undead." "It's not just some undead," Agni said. "It's an undead army." "Our former customers?" "I doubt it." Scouts counted at least 24 elder liches leading contingents of undead warriors around. They're nothing I've ever heard described before, but each one of those warriors was at least as powerful as the elder liches. "We need to get out of here before they notice us because we're as good as dead if they do." A part of Falagrim laughed helplessly at the ludicrous situation. Demons. Dragons. Undead. Those damn demi-humans were preparing to fight human opponents, but it looked like they got everything but. "What are your orders?" Agni asked. "Me?" Falagrim raised an eyebrow. "I thought you were the one that got everyone all riled up." "We had to do it anyway," she said. "You're still our leader. Where are we going?" Where could they go? They had enough supplies to get back home, but returning as they were would mean the end of Clan Fieldhammer. The theocracy wouldn't deal with them and they couldn't get past the undead to reach the human nation in the north, if it still existed. Maybe the undead had spilt over from there. Falagrim took a deep breath, expelling it noisily through his nostrils. We're going back west, he told her. West? Yeah. To the Abelian Hills. This demon emperor has an army. I haven't heard of any army that turns down dwarf-forged equipment. From what the Armart we captured said, they'll have a big supply of demi-humans from their conquest. If things play out right, we'll do even better than we expected with the Goblin army. It was also their only choice. He needed to turn this disaster around. If he had to deal with a devil to stave off ruin, so be it.